Previously in Slow Horses, we found out that Frank Harkness was the main mastermind behind both the London bombings and the attempted assassination of the veteran MI5 officer David Cartwright. This time around, we are given a more concrete reason behind Frank's plans and also his decision to send an assassin after David's former bodyguard, Sam Chapman. Meanwhile, River finally returns from France, as he has more or less understood what went down at the Les Arbres house, only to find an even more surprising connection. Frank Harkness was earlier seen directly only once before, at the Les Arbres mansion, where he had attacked River Cartwright. Frank has now also traveled to London from France to attend an important meeting as he walks through the streets with a specific location in mind. The man finally reaches his destination, which initially seems like an underground den of sorts, until he takes an elevator up to a lavish apartment. A group of security personnel frisk and check Frank's body and clothes to ensure that he is not carrying anything dangerous, and upon passing all safety protocols, he is finally taken inside for the meeting. Although we are not introduced to the man that Frank is meeting in this episode, it is very evident that he is someone extremely influential and possibly holding some high position in a Middle Eastern country's governance or its aristocracy. After all, Frank addresses the man as Your Highness, making it clear that he is involved with some royal family in the Gulf region. The Middle Eastern man is the one who had given, or rather outsourced, the bombing mission to Frank and his team, as he intended to kill someone specific on that particular evening, right outside the Westakers shopping center. However, the mission did not go according to plan, and he reminded Frank that he did not need to outsource the job to the Frenchman, since his own country's secret operatives could have carried it out. The only reason, he states, for having hired Frank to kill his target was because of Frank's reputation in the market as a hitman who does not leave any trace of his work. Therefore, Frank had failed the mission on two major levels. Firstly, the job was to kill the target in the parking area and make it look like an accident, which had somehow been made into a suicide bombing plot during the execution. Secondly, the perpetrator behind the bombing, who took the alias of Robert Winters, had even uploaded a video about his involvement, essentially leaving a trail to Frank Harkness and, in turn, to his Middle Eastern client. Frank apologizes to his client for these two major blunders, stating that the man he had appointed to do the job got carried away by his own personal motives. However, the client does not want to show any forgiveness, and his intention at present is to kill Frank to ensure that the authorities will never be able to trace anything back to him. While being forcefully dragged away, Frank reveals to the man that although the police will not be able to figure out what had happened, the name of Robert Winters getting released to the public would mean that some old MI5 agents would know exactly what had gone down. His intention is to warn the client about this dangerous situation, and it works successfully, as the client now wants Frank to get rid of these old agents by the end of the day, so that there would be nobody left to figure out that Winters was actually an old fake identity created by the MI5. When Frank claims that he had already tried to get rid of two such agents, referring to David Cartwright and Sam Chapman, it seems obvious that he had been trying to kill the men only to cover up the failure regarding the Westakers bombing mission. When one of Diana Taverner's subordinates, Gidi Rahman, had looked into the passport details of Robert Winters, she had essentially uncovered a huge MI5 secret. Taverner realized almost immediately that the identity of Robert Winters was one created by the British intelligence agency, and so it being used for a terrorist attack in London meant that someone from the inside was somehow involved in the whole matter. But technically speaking, the MI5 was never meant to create such cold bodies or fake identities, and very few people in the agency ever knew of their existence, and Diana wanted to keep it like that at present. Therefore, she arranged for Rahman to be sidelined and sent to work all by herself, and she even took the first desk's authorization for it without him realizing so. Thus, when Whelan learned of the development, he was shocked and also grew suspicious of Taverner's intentions, perhaps figuring out that she wanted to hide something from him. The professional relationship between the MI5 first and second desks is not very friendly, as Taverner very evidently sees Whelan just as a stooge placed in the position of the director for political reasons. Whelan, on the other hand, always wants to make his presence and opinions felt and tries to have the final say in every matter. Therefore, The character of Gidi Rahman could easily be fitted into this indirect feud between the two authority figures, and in the previous episode, Whelan finally appointed Rahman to conduct investigations for his sake and directed her to look into more such fake identities. Diana Taverner had not chosen the head of the dogs, Emma Flight, either, as she was hired from outside the MI5 by Whelan, and so she does not consider Flight too effective. This is why, Taverner reveals, she had herself asked to see the blood match reports from the crime scene at David Cartwright's house. It is from this report that she finds out that River is still alive, and also realizes that he is involved in keeping David off the radar of the police. She now confronts Flight for having hidden this crucial information from her, and the tactical unit leader admits that she just wanted to find David and then reveal everything to Taverner. Back in the park office, though, Whelan confronts Taverner for having kept secrets from him too, since he has now found out, through Rahman, that the MI5 had created multiple fake identities. Rahman's investigation into the MI5 records and the events at David Cartwright's house had made it clear to her that another created identity, that of Adam Lockhead, had been used to attack the veteran ex-director. It was already evident that Adam Lockhead, or Bertrand, who was pretending to be Lockhead, looked a lot like River Cartwright. Therefore, based on all these new findings, the current MI5 first desk, as well as the second desk, must find out the whole truth about the situation. It becomes clear to them that River Cartwright is still alive and currently in France, while David Cartwright is somewhere in London, and interrogating him will be instrumental in solving the mystery of the fake identities. The fact that Catherine Standish had essentially lost David Cartwright in the previous episode, with the man walking out of her apartment building all by himself, meant that he was in extreme danger now. On the one side, Frank Harkness and his hired assassin want to kill David, and on the other, MI5 sends Emma Flight to go search for the man. Thirdly, the Slough House agents, led by Jackson Lamb, want to ensure that David is not found by the MI5 while being in such a forgetful and vulnerable state, since they would hold him responsible for some past actions. The situation escalated further when David Cartwright reached the address where the MI5 headquarters was located earlier. Since David is suffering from Alzheimer's, he can only recall the address from during his time in the service, so he goes to the place, not realizing that the building has now been transformed into a luxurious hotel. The receptionist at the hotel immediately informs the MI5 top bosses of this, and they direct Flight to the place. But as they realize that River is also returning to London at the same time, Taverner orders Flight to go after River and to send 2 of her men to collect his grandfather from the hotel instead. However, Catherine and Sam Chapman can reach the hotel and David Cartwright just before the agents can get to him, and ultimately, the ex-director is successfully saved by the Slough House agents. However, the same can't be said for Chapman, as Frank and his assassin temporarily shift their focus on him. The assassin breaks into Chapman's office and seemingly beats him to death, ensuring that he will not be able to link Frank with the 2 criminal attacks in London. As River Cartwright returns to London after his investigative trip to France, he spots Flight and her men at the station, clearly waiting to arrest him, and successfully evades them. He then reaches the countryside and sneaks into his grandfather's house to go through a box of some old stuff that David kept stored away. It is now that Slow Horses Season 4 seems to propose an unusual theory, which makes it seem like River has a secret link with the group at Les Arbres. Earlier in the episode, Sam Chapman revealed that when he worked as David's bodyguard some 30 years ago, the MI5 director had sent him to the French town of Lavande on a secret mission, which seemingly nobody else at the agency knew about. At the time, a young Frank Harkness was the leader of a violent gang of misfits, all living at the Les Arbres mansion, and he already had seemingly multiple wives and sons from his relationship with them. Chapman had been given the responsibility of discreetly driving a car to Les Arbres, but he did not know that the car contained loads of weapons, ammunition, and also a stack of fake passports in the names of identities created by the MI5 as cold bodies. Essentially, the MI5, or its erstwhile director, David Cartwright, was doing a favor for Frank and his gang in exchange for a favor in return. This favor, which Frank Harkness had to do, was to release a particular woman from his gang, and Chapman was to drive her back to London. But what was even more peculiar was that the woman revealed nothing about herself to Chapman, and she even fled from his car after they crossed over to England. Even David never asked him anything about what happened to the woman, almost as if her escaping Chapman's company was a part of the plan all along. When River returns to his grandfather's house at the end of the episode and goes through the box of old stuff, he finds some paintings very similar to the ones he had seen on the walls of the Les Arbes mansion. When he had earlier spoken to Natasha back in Lavande, she had told him that a different woman had made those paintings there. It is highly possible that this same woman had been freed from the gang by David in exchange for the fake passports and guns, suggesting that she was someone very important to him. But the fact that David still had paintings made by the woman inside a box at his home, and the very glaring fact that River looked very much like one of the goons, Bertrand, might perhaps suggest that the woman became like a daughter figure to David, and she soon gave birth to River. Thus, River might not actually be David's biological grandson either, and the latter might have just adopted him into his family. While this might very well not be the real case, the entire extent of the situation will surely be revealed in the next 2 episodes of the season. As of now, though, River gets caught by Emma Flight at the very end of episode 4 and will first have to deal with interrogation at the hands of the MI5.